Hello, everyone, and welcome to the virtual Princeton Public Library. We are very excited to be kicking off Local Author Day 2025 with this presentation from Kevin G. Chapman. We love to offer practical presentations for you on the business side of writing as well as the creative side, and Kevin's going to join those here for you tonight. So we have this program will be recorded and will be available after the fact on our YouTube channel. We will also be sending out slides following the presentation to everybody who has registered. If you have any questions, certainly follow up with us at the library, but we will send all of those out. We encourage you to ask questions. There is the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, or you can pop them in the chat. If there's anything immediately pressing, I will interrupt Kevin, but most of the questions we'll save for the end, since presumably he will get to a lot of these topics as we go. But please feel free to put those in there, and we will get to those. So, Kevin G. Chapman is our presenter. He is an independent mystery thriller author. He is an award winner. You can see some of his accolades on the screen there for his books. We have several at the library. We encourage you to check those out, as well as, of course, at the author fair tomorrow. He is the winner, or the author of the Mike Stoneman Thriller series. Book 7 is on its way, we've heard, secret news, as well as several standalones. Not only is he an author, but he is an audiobook creator. So we are going to turn things over to him, and he will lead us through a demonstration and information. Thank you so much for being here, Kevin.
Thank you, Nora. I am very happy to be able to do this and help out some of my fellow indie authors. I had somebody who was a mentor to me, helping me years ago when I was just getting started, and it's nice to have this opportunity to do the same. So we're going to talk about audiobooks. So I'm going to share my screen and do the old PowerPoint presentation because it helps. There will be a copy of this available from the library to download, and there are links at the back of this program with helpful articles and blog posts that you may find helpful in this process. So what are we here to do? We are here to talk about how you, if you want to, can create an audiobook. And that's something that I get asked about a lot, and we're going to try to figure out for you if it's something that you think you can do. So again, put questions in the Q&A function or the chat, and we will get to the questions. So first of all, why? Why do you want to have an audiobook? Well, you probably know most of this. There is far less competition in the market for audiobooks. There are about 10% as many audiobooks as there are ebooks out there for sale. So your audiobooks are in a much smaller competition group. Audiobook buyers are conditioned to pay more for a book that you as an independent author are selling for $3.99 or $4.99. You can charge $10.99 or $12.99 or $16.99 for an audiobook. And audiobook buyers are used to paying that amount for audio. So the profit margin for an audiobook is actually much higher than for an ebook. You can distribute directly, which can give you the opportunity for even higher profits, as well as going through the various retailers that are out there. And the retailers do pay you more in royalties for your audiobooks than for your ebooks and paperbacks. So if you can get one, it's a good thing to have. So now, why don't you have one? Well, because first of all, it is expensive to hire a professional narrator and a professional engineer and create a professionally produced audiobook. It can run $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 upfront to create the audiobook. The expected return on that investment is speculative for an independent author. You don't necessarily know how much you're going to get back from your audiobooks. And I can tell you for myself, it's been a very long, slow climb to make revenue off of significant revenue off of audiobooks. It's there, and it's slow, and it climbs, and it gets better. But if I had spent $5,000 to produce each of my audiobooks, I would be nowhere near at the break-even point because I've not had that much revenue or profit from the audiobooks that I have created. So you don't have one because it's expensive. And you also maybe don't have one because you think that self-narrating is too difficult for you to do, and so you haven't done it. So, what we're going to talk about tonight is, can you do it? Is it something that you should think about doing? Because it's good to have, and if you can do it, it is definitely a benefit for your book marketing and for your writing in general. So, how do you get there? All right, step one, write a great book. Easy, right? Write your best book and get it ready. Step 1A is you've got to make the decision to spend the time that's necessary to create an audiobook. You're a writer. You're spending your time writing. As soon as you finish the last book, you're going to be starting to work on the next book. And if you're going to do an audiobook, you're going to have to take a pause and take maybe 6 to 8 weeks working almost primarily on your audiobook in order to get it done. It is a time commitment. It is an effort commitment. And you have to do that if you're going to get it done. So how much time? Well, rough estimates. If a chapter is around 3,000 words, it might take you 20 to 30 minutes to narrate one chapter. Then you have to edit that 20 or 30 minutes of raw text down to about 15 minutes of finished audio. That could take you as much as an hour and a half. And that's 3 times as much time editing your audio as it took you to narrate your audio. And that's just the way it is. We will show you in this program how we edit an audiobook. And it is a time-consuming process to get it right. And then there's post-production and mastering of your audio, and that's maybe another 10 to 15 minutes per chapter. And keep in mind that, at least for me, you can't narrate all day. If I go more than about 90 minutes narrating, my voice starts to give out. And you don't want that to happen. So you can't do it all at once. You can't sit down for one weekend and spend 60 hours. Well, you can't do 60 hours in a weekend. Say you can't spend 30 hours in a weekend just knocking out your audiobook. You have to pace yourself because your voice isn't going to last for that many hours. So for me, for an average fiction novel that's say 90,000 words, figure you're going to spend 60 to 80 hours over the course of at least 3 or 4 weeks, if not more, to narrate, edit, master, and finish your audiobook. And if it's your first time, it's going to take longer. It always takes longer. First time you do something, it always there's a learning curve, and you have to be ready. And as I say, keep in mind, I have a nice little cup of hot tea with honey and lemon here to keep my voice going during this program. You'll need that. So let's say you've decided you're going to do it. When do you do it? When do you do your audiobook? And I would tell you, first of all, you should do your audiobook before you publish any other edition of the book, because the process of narrating the book is your final proofread. People will tell you all the time that it's a good idea when you're proofreading to read the book out loud. And few of us probably do that because it's long and boring and you just don't want to. But if you're narrating the audiobook, it's an automatic proofread. And you will find mistakes in your text when you are narrating. So don't publish the book first and then do the audio. Make sure you do the audio first before you publish the other editions. And it's very helpful when you launch to be able to have the audiobook and the ebook and the paperback or hardcover ready to go all at once. So now you've decided to do it. What do you need? Really, it's not that much. You need a home studio and you'll need a professional microphone. I use this setup right here that's called the Focusrite Scarlett. It comes with the headphones, an amp, the microphone, all the cords that you need. It's $300. You may also want a mic stand and a pop filter like this one right here to put in front of your microphone. So maybe another 15, 20 bucks. That's a pretty good setup. It is plenty to do an audiobook. If you want to go a little cheaper, you can go cheaper. Here's a microphone stand, comes with a pop screen, comes with its cords. This microphone plugs directly into your laptop, so it doesn't have an intermediate amplifier to allow you to control the audio settings a little bit more finely. But it's good enough. It's like a podcast microphone, 60 bucks. So the outlay and upfront outlay is not that huge. And remember, once you have this professional microphone, it's going to serve you well when you do podcasts or streams or Facebook Lives. Having high quality audio equipment is always a good idea. So it's not like you're going to use it only for your podcasts. You're also going to need software. Fortunately, the software is free. This software that I'm going to be showing you tonight is called Audacity. It comes from ACX, which is Audible. They make it available for free, and it is fine for narrating audiobooks. There's other free software out there. There's also very expensive software out there for audio mixing and all kinds of tricks that you can do with your audio, but you don't need that. You can get away just fine with the free Audacity software. You don't need anything more than that. So $300, $60, somewhere between those numbers is your upfront outlay for the equipment that you need. Then you got to set up a home studio. Setting up a home studio is not that hard. There's a lot of good resources out there on the internet that'll show you how to do it. There's a lot of different spaces that you can use. You just need it to be quiet. I do it in my basement. I hang blankets up all around my table, as you can see on the photo there, which dulls any sort of echo, and it works just fine for me. You need to make sure you don't have a lot of background noise because background noise will ruin your audio track. And it's just one of those things you will learn as you try to do it. I recommend that you try to do it in a space where you can have a peripheral monitor connected to your computer, even if it's a laptop, so that you don't have your laptop computer near your microphone, which is going to pick up just a tiny bit of background noise from the fan from your laptop, no matter how quiet it is. But all of those things are doable. At the end of the presentation, there are a couple of links for tips about how to set up your home studio. All right, you got the equipment, you got the studio. Now what do you need? Your book. You think you have your book already. The answer is no, you don't. You have a book that is meant to be read, not a book that is meant to be narrated. My recommendation is that you take that book and you create a script. The script, like you see on the screen, will give you information that you need as the narrator. Who's talking? Are they using a particular tone of voice? Is there something else happening that you need to be aware of before you start narrating that sentence? Believe me when I tell you that if you try to narrate the book just from the book, you'll do a lot of backtracking and you'll do a lot of redoing when you realize at the end of the sentence that there's a dialogue tag that says, "He said excitedly." And then you remember, oh crap, I didn't read that sentence in an excited tone of voice. And it's interesting because when you read, you see that dialogue tag and you sort of retroactively process that sentence that you just read with the information that you just got from that dialogue tag. But when you're narrating, you can't do that. And it will be helpful if you take that book and you make it into a script, something like this, which is also another opportunity to do some proofreading. A couple of other just tips before we get into the demo. If you're going to use voices for your characters, you don't have to, but if you're going to, it's a good idea to have a character sheet that gives you notations about the voices for each character so that when it comes time to narrate in that character's voice, you remember what that voice is going to sound like. What I do is I try to use the voices of real characters from movies or television shows or real people who I know. And I'm going to say, okay, this voice is going to be like that. And that gives me a mental cue so that I can remember what that voice is supposed to sound like. You don't have to use voices, though. You don't have to be a voice actor and do voices for all of your characters. You can just narrate the book in your own voice as if you're just reading it to your child or your or your friend. It's up to you. I try to do some voices because I think it helps the overall quality of the audiobook, but you don't have to. Make sure you have a bottle of water handy in a container that doesn't make any noise. Also, make sure you have a pen and a notepad because you will find errors while you narrate, and you need some place to write them down so that you can go back and fix the text later. Also, make sure that your audio input from your microphone is picking up your microphone and not the laptop computer. I'm not going to go into the horror story of how I've narrated my first book and discovered after the fact that The input from my microphone or from the laptop was not picking up my microphone. It was picking up the laptop's built-in microphone. And needless to say, that doesn't work as well. So don't make that mistake. This is why you test and you listen to what you just recorded so that you can make sure it sounds correct. At the end of this PowerPoint, again, there's a whole bunch of links to helpful hints about tips for narrating. The last thing to talk about before we actually start is you need to practice. You need to test everything. Set up your microphone, set up your studio, and do a test chapter. And then try to figure out how far away do you have to be from the microphone? Do you want the microphone tilted toward you, tilted away from you? Do you want it over your head? Do you want it on the table? It all makes slight differences, and you want it to sound the way you want it to sound. How far away does your monitor need to be so you can read it well? How high do you have to put the audio levels on your amplifier to make sure that you get the right volume? What kind of chair do you want to sit in? Do you need to turn off the heating and air conditioning system in the house because it creates background noise otherwise? All of these things are important at the end. And if you don't test at the beginning, you'll end up narrating for a long time and then discovering that you have to redo it because there were settings that just weren't correct. All of these things can be fixed, but it's a really good idea to test. Fortunately, the Audible software gives you something, and this is the last bullet here at the bottom, called ACX Check. And what that does, I'll show it to you in a minute, it checks the audio you just recorded against the standards necessary for you to upload it to Audible. You can fix certain things in post-production, but it's helpful for you to know whether something like your background noise is within the standards for ACX. If it's not, you can't fix that in post-production. You got to fix it now and figure out what's causing that background noise and how to stop it. So here we go. 20 minutes after 7, we're ready to actually do this. So let's narrate. What you're looking at on the screen right now is an Audible. This is what your audio looks like on the screen. This is the digital representation of sounds inside Audible. And you can see these, what they call wave forms. And each waveform represents a sound, usually a word or a series of words. And when you go back to edit, this is what you're going to be editing, is these wave forms. And we're going to show you exactly how to do that. All right, I'm going to set up to start the narration demo. Nora, are there any questions in the box that I should cover now?
Nothing yet, thank you.
Beautiful. Okay, so now we're going to share a different screen. All right, this is your Audacity screen. I have already preloaded a track at the top called Test Track. I've also preloaded 2 little bits of what they call room noise. So you need this room noise when you're editing, and we're going to come back to this later. But what you can do with this room noise, what room noise is what does your audio sound like when you're not speaking? It's not completely silent. There is something there. So I'm going to do a little test right now on this track, and I'm not going to talk for about 3 seconds. Now I'm going to have to go back to the beginning and do it correctly. And recording 51. All right. See, sometimes you just can't figure it out. Mute. There we go. We're going to try this one more time. Okay, that was about 5 seconds of room noise. Now, when you take this room noise right here, and I'm going to have to see, give me a minute here. Okay. You click on this button here, it says Analyze, and there's this magic button called ACX Check. And ACX Check is going to check this bit of audio, and it's going to tell me that the levels are way too low because there's nothing on it. The volume is way too low because I didn't say anything. But there's one here at the bottom that says noise floor. The noise floor is minus 62.60 decibels. It's got to be at least 60 or quieter, where higher negative numbers means quieter. So you see this little thing says pass. So the room noise right now, while I'm narrating right here, even without buffers or without anything, my home studio set up, is just barely soft enough to pass the ACX check. But what I have down here is some room noise that I recorded when I was actually had my studio set up, and I will use that when I'm doing editing. When I check that, it's minus 75, much quieter than the minus 62. The level it has to be to pass ACX is minus 60. So you want to have a little bit of a buffer if you can. But that's what it looks like. So here we go. I have a small snippet of text from a short story that is the prequel to my Mike Stoneman thriller series. And I am going to narrate this into the microphone so you can see exactly how it goes. And this is going to take probably 3 to 4 minutes. As I'm doing it, watch the waveforms as they go by on the screen in this top box, and you'll see a few things that will happen while I'm narrating. Part 1. The body was still wet when Mike Stoneman bent down to examine the dried blood clotted into the man's thick black hair. The body was still wet when Mike Stoneman bent down to examine the dried blood clotted into the dead man's thick black hair. There was a good-sized gash in the scalp and a small lump, which might have been bigger if he hadn't drowned in the swimming pool immediately after hitting his head. A splash of blood was still clinging to the blue-painted concrete lip of the pool, probably where his head made contact. The deck around the pool was teeming now with uniformed police, the departing EMT crew, and at least one female journalist who was flirting with one of the EMTs. Mike's thought was, "Who the hell let all these people into my crime scene?" "Officer!" Mike barked at the closest uniform. "Get these people back off the pool deck. I don't want any more shoes trampling my evidence." And when the officer hesitated, he shouted, "Now, officer, please." He had to remind himself to say please. "Is the coroner here yet?" he inquired of his partner, Dave Curry. He inquired of his partner, David Curry, who had been elevated to detective status only a month earlier. "I don't think so, Mike," he responded, then quickly added, "But I'll go check." When then quickly added, "But I'll go check," when he saw Stoneman's unhappy glare. He hurried into the house, which was crowded with neighbors, officers, reporters, and a mortician who had already arrived to claim the body. Mike took a tour around the expansive backyard, then went into the house in search of the sole witness to the night's events. "Is that the daughter?" Mike asked Dave casually, motioning to the crowd around a plush velvet sofa on one side of the living room. "Oh, yeah," Dave leered in response as he whipped out a small notebook. "Miss Susan Fenton, age 16, only child of Stuart and Eleanor Fenton. Mother died a little over a year ago. Ovarian cancer, very nasty. Father worked on Wall Street, long hours. The neighbors say the kid was pretty wild." The neighbors say the kid is pretty The neighbors say the kid is pretty wild. Lots of parties here in the house. She's seen a shrink since the mother died. Pretty messed up, in other words, even before tonight. All right. 3 minutes and 16 seconds of narration. That was about 355 words. So do the extrapolation, 3,000 words would be about 30 minutes of raw audio. So what you see is what I recorded. Down here at the bottom, on this track at the bottom, is a chapter, a full chapter. Audible allows you to zoom in and out. So here is, this chapter was about, what is it, 14 minutes of raw audio. This is what the whole chapter looked like when it was raw and I was finished recording it. So that's a waveform. That's what it looks like. And you can zoom in on it and you can see the detail and you can edit it from there. I'm going to come back to this in just a minute. All right. Let's see if I can get that. There we go. So in a minute, we're going to go and edit that audio that I just recorded. But as you were listening, you heard a lot of things that obviously aren't going to show up on the finished audio. And here are some tips for you, and you can think about these as we go back and do the editing. The first is, don't rush the process. Feel free to stop, take a breath, take a sip of your tea. You will edit out all of those pauses when you do the editing. There is no need to read the text into the microphone exactly as you think it should be on the finished audio, because that's what the editing is for. It's great when you can read a sentence with no mistakes, and that sentence without any editing is going to end up on the final audio. But that's rare. There's almost always something about just about every sentence that requires at least a little nip and tuck somewhere. But don't worry about it. Don't try to do it too quickly. Also, as many people will tell you this if you take public speaking courses, people tend to be louder on the first word of any given phrase or sentence, and to be softer at the end. You come in hard and you finish just a little soft. And that's just normal for a lot of people. So you need to really make an effort to come in at an even volume and keep that same volume up for the entire sentence and not trail off at the end. You also want your pace to be consistent unless there's a reason not to be. If you're in a portion of your story that's very tense and very exciting and you want to speed up just a little bit and have a little more excitement in your voice, that's fine. But when you're not trying to do that, try to maintain a pace that's fairly standard and even. One of the reasons for this is that when you're editing, there will be noises in between your words. It just happens. Your tongue makes little clicks, and you may take a breath, and there'll be something, a breath noise on the microphone, or there's some reason why the space between words needs to be replaced with room noise, with blank room noise. And if you're narrating at a relatively standard pace, what you can do is you can create a little clip of room noise. You saw that on my Audible. I'll show you in a minute. That represents the standard amount of space, for example, between sentences for you. If it's 7/10 of a second, 8/10 of a second, whatever it is, and you can then insert that room noise of exactly that amount of time in between every sentence. And your words and your sentences will flow as if you were reading it continuously, because you keep up an even pace. You do want to make sure you enunciate. Your words need to be clear. They don't have to be perfect, but they need to be good enough that a reader or a listener is going to be able to understand the first time through. Because remember, on audio, it's hard to go back. In an ebook or a paperback, you can go back and reread that sentence if you didn't get it right the first time. Once the audio is passed, it's done. And audio listeners are seldom going to go back and rewind and try to listen to something again that they just listened to. So very important to make sure you get the words correct the first time. And remember, errors are going to happen. So what you heard when I was reading is if I made an error and I thought that I was going to need to re-record that last sentence or that last fragment of a sentence, I made a little sound like this, a little double click. You can also clap your hands. You could ring a bell if you have something next to you. What that does is it creates a mark on the audio track that tells you in this spot there was an error. And when you go back to edit, you'll know where that error is so you can fix it. Very important because otherwise you'll waste a lot of time finding the places where you need to go back and do a correction. When you do make a mistake, you want to go back to either the start of the sentence or the start of a new clause or a phrase in your sentence that is an obvious place where there was a pause. So after a dialogue tag, oops, after a dialogue tag, or after a comma where there's a pause, where you can pick it up and go from there and have it be seamless. It's always easier to read a whole sentence and get it right than to have half of a sentence and then make a mistake and then go back and read the other half of a sentence and make the whole sentence sound correct. But you can do that with some practice. But you want to go back to a place that it's going to be easier for you to find and easier for you to start from. And oftentimes you're going to leave a little gap after you make a mistake. Just take a breath, deep breath, take a drink, get ready, and then be ready to start over again to do the correction. I will tell you that I often run out of breath. So stopping, taking a deep breath, which makes noise into the microphone, and then be ready to start reading the next sentence allows me to get through that whole sentence without running out of air. I will also say the first time I started narrating an audiobook that I wrote, I realized that I had written some long ass sentences. Why did I write a sentence that was that long? I couldn't get all the way through the sentence without running out of breath. That's a signal to me that I needed to write a little shorter sentences. Now, I'm going to say this 100 times. When you are doing an audiobook recording, you want to make sure that you back up your work constantly. So what I just did was let's say I just had narrated a chapter. It was only a fragment of a chapter, but if it was a whole chapter, the next thing I'm going to do is edit. No, it's not. The next thing I'm going to do is back up that file. I'm going to take that file, I'm going to copy it out of Audible and onto the hard drive of my laptop. And then I'm going to take it off the hard drive of my laptop and I'm going to copy it onto a peripheral drive. So I have it backed up two places. Then I'm going to go back and start editing. Because if you screw up and you didn't back up your work and you have to go back and re-record that whole chapter again, it's a half an hour or 45 minutes or whatever it took to do that again. You do not want to have that happen. Back up, back up, back up all the time, constantly. You cannot back up too much. So you've backed up that file, safely tucked away on your hard drive so that no matter what you do in Audible, you've got it, you can get it back again, no matter what you do to it. You're also going to probably save that file, and I do, in a folder called raw wave files. All your files on the audio recording are wave files, .wav. And before you start editing, save that file as a wave file that's called raw or first draft or whatever. Then you start editing. And when you finish editing, you save it again in a file called edited files or first edit or edited wave, something so that you can find that edited file again if you need that again, and then you're going to back that one up. So let's talk about editing. A couple of tips before we start. First, back up your files. Back up, back up, back up. Also, have a snippet of room noise available in the amount that you want to use for your spaces between sentences. Also do this. I'm going to show you in a minute. Start at the back and work toward the front to fix those mistakes, to edit out the flubs before you start editing from the start and going to the end. The reason for that is that if you start at the beginning and you start editing, you will find that you just spent 3 or 4 minutes editing a portion of text only to find out, that you screwed something up and then you re-recorded it. And you don't want to spend that time. You don't want to edit material that you're going to delete. So you want to delete all the flubs first before you start editing. I'll also suggest that you try to edit soon after you record. You don't have to. You can record the whole book and then go back and start editing the whole book. But I find that it's really helpful to edit when the material is fresh in your mind, when you remember what you did, when you remember what you just narrated, and you remember how it sounded. And if you can do that, it also paces yourself. So you can edit for narrate for an hour, and then spend 3 hours editing that hour of raw audio you just narrated. That's 4 hours. That's a day or an evening for me after my day job is done. It's helpful to pace yourself like that and get that editing done before you go on to the next piece of narrating. You don't have to. It's just a tip. All right. So let's talk about actually editing. This is really the nuts and bolts of audiobook creation. Narrating into the microphone is kind of the easy part. You do that, but you don't have a book yet. You don't have a book until you've edited that narration. And it's the editing that takes time, and it's the editing that takes practice, but it's absolutely essential. So this is the part of it that you might say, oh, I don't know if I can do that. Look at this. It looks so complicated. It's not nearly as complicated as you think it is. And this is why I'm going to show it to you right now. So here I am at the end of this piece of audio. And as I go backward through the audio, I see this form right here. See these two straight lines right there? And two more lines right there? That's a flub. So let's listen to what it sounded like. The neighbors say the kid was pretty. Oops, wait a minute. This is still not muted. Darn it. Okay, let's try that again. The neighbors say the kid was pretty wild. The neighbors say the kid is pretty. The neighbors say the kid is pretty wild. All right, so that was a phrase. The neighbors say the kid is pretty wild. I'd screwed it up 2 times before I finally got it right. This is the keeper at the end. All of this is the part that was a screw up. So that is going to go bye-bye. Cut. Gone. Oops. Going backwards through the file again. Okay, here's another one. These 2 lines here was a click. That's what it looks like in the waveform. That's a screw up. So again, let's figure out where I have to start to fix that problem. I don't think so, Mike, he responded, then quickly added, but I'll go check. Then quickly added, okay, so I was good up until then quickly added. So I'm going to find that spot, and I'm going to delete everything up to where I fixed it. And now before I go on, I'm going to double check to make sure I got that right and I didn't delete something that I didn't intend to delete, he responded. Then quickly added, but I'll go check, when he saw Stoneman's unhappy glare. Okay, I got it right. If I hadn't, I can use the old undo function and put back what I just deleted and then fix that before I go on to something else. So make sure when you delete something that you're absolutely sure that you deleted what you intended to delete. And that's another reason why you got to have a backup, because if you screw that up and you find out later that there's something that you deleted that you can't get back, where do you find it? You find it on the backup file. Here's another one here. What does this say? That was me just clearing my voice. So there you go. Let's go back to here. Is the coroner here yet? Is the coroner here? He inquired of his partner, Dave Curry. He inquired of his partner. Okay. You get to the point when you're editing, you can see this waveform right there is the same as this waveform right there. It's not exactly the same, but you can tell that that's the same words being spoken in both those 2 places. And you'll be able to say, boom, get rid of that, cut that, done. There's another one. Oh, that was the very first sentence. The very first sentence of the scene, I messed up. So I'm just going to delete that. I know that's going to go away. All right. Now we're ready to actually edit what's left. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can see these waveforms a little bit better. And we'll see what happens. Now, before I do this, I am going to copy that predetermined room noise. This is 7.67 seconds, or rather 0.767 seconds of room noise. And I'm going to copy that so it's in my clipboard, and I'll have it to use whenever I need it. So here we go. The body was still wet when Mike Stoneman bent down to examine the dried blood clotted into the dead man's thick black hair. There was a good-sized gap. Okay, so there's a pause here between sentences. How long is this pause in real time? It's 0.93 seconds. I can either leave that there and figure, okay, I kind of like that, or I can replace it with the 0.767 seconds that I copied from my clipboard. Black hair. There was a good-sized gash in the scalp and a small lump, which might have been bigger if he hadn't drowned in the swimming pool immediately after hitting his head. Now here's a big gap where I stopped and I took a breath. What's going to happen to that? That's going to get replaced by the 0.767 seconds of room noise. Hitting his head. A splash of blood was still clinging to the blue-painted concrete lip of the pool, probably where his head made contact. The deck around the pool was teeming now with uniformed police, the departing EMT crew. Okay, now this is a sequence of descriptions. With uniformed police, the departing EMT crew, and at least one female journalist. So I would like these gaps to be tiny bit smaller. So I'm going to delete just a little bit from each of these pauses to just tighten that up a little bit and make that sequence a little bit easier. The uniformed police, the departing EMT crew, and at least one female journalist who was flirting with one of the EMTs. Mike's thought was, and that pause there, that's a little too long. And you will find in your own narrating that you'll have a set amount of space that you like to have between a dialogue tag or an intro to dialogue and then the beginning of the actual dialogue. Now, if I make this, oops, where did that come from? If you make that the same space as in between a sentence, it might be too much. But if you make it a little bit less than that, it might sound like just what you're looking for. One of the EMTs. Mike's thought was, who the hell let all these people into my crime scene? Yeah, see, now that's too small. That space there is not enough space. So let's try a full sentence space. Mike's thought was, who the hell let all these people into my crime scene? Maybe a little too much. So I'm going to just delete. I don't want to copy that though, so I'm gonna have to, where is my, I'm just gonna cut that. So there you go. So now you've got a little bit more space between those phrases. Mike's thought was, who the hell let all these people into my crime scene? And then you have another long pause. So no problem for the long pause. You just replace that long pause with your room noise. Officer! Mike. Now, on this particular waveform, you see how the tops and bottoms are flat? That means that I read that a little too loudly. I was a little too close to the microphone. I spoke a little too loudly, and it reached the peak. This is the most volume that the microphone is going to be allowed to pick up, and it cut off the very top and the very bottom of the waveform because it was a little too loud. It's going to be fine, but you could always go back and redo just that one part if you think that it's a little too harsh in the microphone. Officer! Mike barked at the closest uniform. Get these people back off the pool deck. I don't want any more shoes trampling my evidence. And there's another longer pause than I want. We'll replace that with shorter room noise. And when the officer hesitated, he shouted, Now, officer, please. He had to remind himself to say please. Now here's a pause that's a little bit longer than normal, but in the context of this particular sentence, I kind of like that. A little bit of emphasis on what follows. Now, officer, please. He had to remind himself to say please. Is the coroner here yet? But that next one is too long. So we're going to replace that with your basic room noise and continue from there. Oops. Is the coroner here yet? He inquired of his partner, David Curry. Again, this pause is a little too long. So you're just going to use the delete function, make it a little shorter. Is the coroner here yet? He inquired of his partner, David Curry, who had been elevated to detective status only a month earlier. I don't think so, Mike. There's a pause between the end of one sentence and the beginning of another sentence, a little bit longer than I want, so fix it. I don't think so, Mike, he responded. Here, this gap is a little too long, so make it shorter. I don't think so, Mike, he responded, then quickly added, But I'll go check, when he saw Stoneman's unhappy glare. He hurried into the house, which was crowded with neighbors, officers, reporters, and a mortician who had already arrived to claim the body. I had a little cough there. I didn't mark that as a flub because you're going to figure that one out pretty quickly. Fix that. Body. Mike took a tour around the expansive backyard, then went into the house in search of the sole witness to the night's events. Is that the daughter? Mike asked Dave casually. A little bit longer than I want there, so fix that. Is that the daughter? Mike asked Dave casually, motioning to the crowd around a plush velvet sofa on one side of the living room. Oh, yeah, Dave leered in response as he whipped out a small notebook. Now, this pause may not be too long, but it's got a little click in it. Listen. You may not even hear that. There's a little click there that shouldn't be there. So you would definitely want to get rid of that by putting in your standard room noise. Notebook. Miss Susan Fenton, age 16. Only child. Oops. Did you hear that? All notebook. Miss. Oops. All notebook. One of those clicks that I just erased was the last sound of book. That sound. See, this is supposed to be there. But this other one here, that's the one I want to get rid of. So I just undo it, redo it, and a small notebook. Miss Susan Fenton, age 16, only child of Stuart and Eleanor Fenton. Mother died a little over a year ago. Ovarian cancer, very nasty. Father worked on Wall Street, long hours. The neighbors say the kid is pretty wild. Lots of parties here in the house. She's seen a shrink since the mother died. Pretty messed up, in other words, even before tonight. And we're done with that. Okay, remember it was about 3 minutes and 17 seconds when I started? It's now 2 minutes and 16 seconds. So I shaved off about a third of the audio in the editing process. I ended up with 2 minutes and 16 seconds. Now what do? Now you go, you select your file, you're going to export this, export audio. You're going to give it a name. In this case, the name is test. This is from the short story called Fool Me Twice. Part 1. And I'm going to export that to someplace on my file tree. so that I know where it is. And we're going to talk about the file tree in just a minute. So there you go. That is the process of narrating and editing the audio. But we're not done. Oops. Sometimes the PowerPoint demo narrating. There we go. Let's go from that slide. Here we go. Again, after you're done editing, back it up. Back it up, back it up, back it up. Make sure that you keep multiple copies of all of your files so that you can find them at a later time when you decide that you need them. I think it's a good idea to keep separate folders of the raw files and the edited files. And then when you do the mastering, you keep a file of the mastered files so that they're all available for you. But you're not done with the production process. You'd still need to do what they call mastering. So ACX has requirements for your audio level. The peak level means the highest volume of anything on the track. The noise floor has got to be quieter than minus 60 decibels. You have to have an intro that is between a half a second and 9/10 of a second of room noise at the beginning. You also need you need to have a chapter number and a title if you have it. And you also have to have an ending to the chapter, which is 4 to 5 seconds of room noise. These are all ACX requirements. You have to have them on every track. Every chapter has to be a separate track. In order to master your file, to make sure that it fits these parameters, I run a series of processes within the Audacity program. I run a volume normalizer to minus 21 decibels, which is right in the middle of the acceptable range. I run a limiter to make sure that nothing is higher than 3.5, which is the maximum. And I run what's called a normalizer. And then I check the levels. If everything is acceptable, then I'm done. I'm going to show you how to do that in just a minute. All these levels are in the PowerPoint, and you'll be able to track them on your if you download the PowerPoint from the library's website, you'll have all of this on your own computer. So we're going to go back to Audacity.
Question for you here, Kevin, from the
Sure.
crowd. When you were saving or exporting the test file, the question was, so the edited version is saved as an MP3, not a WAV file. Is that correct?
No, it should be saved as a WAV file. If I saved it, if I did that wrong, I apologize. It says that you're right. It says MP3. I will save these as WAV files. You don't convert it to an MP3 file until the very end. When you're all done with it, then the last thing that you do is you save it as an MP3. I screwed that up by not checking what format it was. You're right. It should have been a WAV file. So thank you for noticing that. Good question. All right. So back to my track. I'm going to look at my track. And I'm going to do my ACX analysis before I do any mastering and see what happens. Run the check. How does it come out? The peak level is actually pretty quiet. Not bad at all. I got plenty of room as far as the peak volume. But the absolute volume, the RMS level, is too quiet. It's got to be at least minus 23. I like to make it about minus 21, which is louder than minus 23. Right now, it's minus 25. So when I was narrating it, the volume was a little softer than ACX wants it to be. But the noise floor was fine. So let me go through the mastering process and show you how that works. There's a little button here that says select. You're selecting this whole file. So you select the file, you go to Effect, you go to, in this case, I'm going to go to the first thing I'm going to do. They change this all the time. Okay. Loudness normalization. Loudness normalization, I'm going to set to minus 21. Right now it's minus 25. So this is going to make everything a little bit louder. Watch what happens to the waveform when I do this. Boom. See, everything got bigger. How about that? Bigger waveform means that it's louder. Okay. Now I'm going to go to my loudness normalization. Oh, no, that was the loudness normalization. See, that sometimes you don't do these right. Where's my limiter? There's my limiter. Wow. I'm going to run this limiter at minus 3.5. And that got even louder because what it did is it pushed the top up a little bit. And then the last thing is you run this normalizer, which is going to bring it down a little bit and brings it down. And now when I run the analysis, aha, the peak levels are good. The loudness is 21.31. Remember, I loudness normalized it to exactly 21, and it went up, I went down a tiny bit in the other process. The noise floor is still good. So this file is now good to go as an upload to Audible. So you're right. So now you take this file, you export it, and this time now it's set correctly as a WAV file. But this is now this has now been mastered. So you give it a new name. Now it's test. It's hard to type on my laptop when it's way out in front of me. Test, fool me twice. And now this is mastered. And it's part 1. So part 1. And you export that out. I got to set up where the files are going. You'll show that, and I'll show you that in a minute. Now you've got a mastered file. When you're all done, you're going to take all your files and you're going to make sure that they're all relatively the same, that they've got the correct amount of volume. You're going to make sure they've got the correct amount of blank space at the beginning. It's got to be between half a second and 9/10 of a second. Right now, it's not that much. So we're going to have to make sure oops, undo that. You have to make sure you take your room noise and you put in the correct amount of room noise at the beginning of the track. And here you've got 4.5 seconds of room noise that you put in at the end of the track. I actually had a book that got rejected by Audible 2 times before they finally accepted it because I didn't have the correct amount of room noise in front of and in the back of every single chapter. I screwed a couple of them up. They rejected the whole book and sent it back to me. And then I had to start the approval process all over again. So then you got this file. And now when you export this file, oops, I didn't select it. Select it, file, export audio. Now you're going to convert it to an MP3 file. That's what you have to upload when you upload it to all of the distribution sites. You need MP3s. So you're going to give that file the proper name. Twice, part 1, and then you're going to export that, and I'll show you where they're going, these exported files, and where you're saving them. And now you've got a file that's actually ready to be uploaded. There we go. Now, we talked about files, and files need to be named properly. It's very important when you organize your files to be able to find them later. So chapter 1 needs to be named O1. Chapter 2, O2. You got to use an O in the front, otherwise your 1 is going to, and your 10 and your 11 aren't gonna sort properly when they default to their alphabetized sorting. So you want to make sure that you name those files. It's a good idea at the end to put the name of the book, or at least some abbreviation of the name of the book, into the file, because when you've done 3 or 4 books, having a file that's called chapter 12 doesn't really tell you anything. Which book is it? So chapter 12 DT, with my most recent book, A Double Takedown, or Double Takedown. It's a good idea to put your author name in the file name at the end, so that when you have your finished files, is an indication of your name, the book's name, and the chapter. So here at the back, you got, for me, O2, so chapter 2 is, and then my name and the name of the book. Over here, you'll see on the left-hand side of the screen, this is an example of the actual files in my file tree, in my file index. This is a short story called The Car, the Dog, and the Girl. These are the audio tracks. These are the MP3 files. And these are all of the tracks. So O1, this is actually the intro. Every file, when you upload it, has to have an intro track where you give the name of the book and your name as an author. And also have to have an outro or an end credit track at the back where you thank everyone for listening to your book and you tell them what the book was and you tell them your name again. And you probably give them your website address. So O1 is the intro, O2 is chapter 1, O3, O4, O5, O6. That's the way they look when they're in the file tree. When they get uploaded, this is being uploaded actually onto BookFunnel, they automatically default to that sequence. So those files upload in exactly the sequence that you want them to be. It will save you a lot of time if you have named your files correctly. And then when you go back and you have an error in a file and you need to replace it, the file naming sequence is going to tell you exactly what you need. And once again, back up, back up, back up. You cannot back up more frequently than you do too frequently. You want to make sure that you've got backups to your backups. If your hard disk crashes on your laptop, if you lose your laptop, you do not want to lose 60 hours of edited audio because you don't have it saved anywhere else. You got a cloud storage, back it up on your cloud storage. And here's that. Thank you, whoever asked that question. Your mastered files before you upload them are MP3s. Everything else that you're working with in the editing process is a WAV file until you're ready to make it final. Once it's an MP3, you don't want to edit it from there because the editing processes on an MP3 are a little bit worse. Back it up, and back it up. So you're almost ready. These are just the last things, and these are things for you to take away when you have this program or this presentation on your own file. The intro and the outro, you need to record those, you need to save those, you need to edit them and master them the same way you do all your other files. You also need to create a sample track on Audible, on Spotify, on most of the retail outlets. They like to have a 4 to 5 minute example of the book that listeners can listen to for free to get an idea of what is this book about and how's the narrator. You want to make sure that sample is the best it can possibly be. Sometimes I even go back and re-edit the sample track just to make sure the sample track is absolutely perfect. And the volume is good, that there's no extra spaces, there's no extra clicks, it sounds as good as it possibly can. You also want it to be a portion of the book that will interest the reader, not just necessarily the first chapter, but something from the first third of the book, let's say, that will draw the listener in and say, ooh, I want to find out what happens after the end of that sample track. Good idea to use a beta listener or two, have them listen to your sample track and give you some feedback. Very, very important to have a good sample track and to choose a good one. It's because audiobook listeners will listen to that sample track before they click on the purchase button. So you want to make sure you do as good a job as you can with that. I also think it's a great idea to have at least 1 or 2 beta listeners who listen to the whole book. There are all kinds of things that will happen that you won't realize. Even after editing the chapter, there may still be a problem that you just missed. Sometimes it's a sentence that's repeated that you just didn't catch, or a word that was repeated, or a word that you said incorrectly and you just missed it in the editing process. Just like you can miss things when you're editing text, you can miss things when you're editing audio. It's a great idea to have somebody listen to the whole book and listen for those kinds of mistakes and then tell you, oh yeah, there's a place in chapter 13 where there's like a 30-second gap of blank space. And I don't know what it's doing there, but it probably shouldn't be there. How did I not see that in the editing process? Well, sometimes you just don't. And again, make sure you have your quiet space in the front and the back of every chapter. Otherwise, it will get rejected by Audible. And then you upload your finished files and you've got an audiobook. Now you got to figure out how to sell it. Well, we don't have enough time tonight to talk about selling it. What I will talk about just for a moment, though, is you can directly sell your audiobooks now. There are a couple of different platforms where you can upload audiobooks and sell them directly to customers. It's perfectly fine. You can have your book, your ebook can be exclusive to Amazon and be in the KDP program and be earning page views. You can still directly sell your audiobook. Um, I use BookFunnel. It's got a nice interface. It's got free software. So I can tomorrow, for example, at the local author fair at the Princeton Public Library, if I have a reader who comes up to me at my table and says, I really like audiobooks. Are your books available as audiobooks? I don't have to give them the link to Audible or the link to Chirp or Nook or any of the other retailers. I can, and they can go to those retailers and they can download the book from them. But I can also give them the direct sale link to that book where they can download it from BookFunnel. And I get 100% of the profit from BookFunnel, which is a wonderful thing. There's also a related retailer called Gumroad, which is affiliated with BookFunnel. And if you need to give out links that people can click on the internet and pay for them with a credit card on the internet, Gumroad will handle the payment, the taking the money. They will handle the distribution of the audiobook, and then they will pay you your author's share, which is going to be more than you would get from Audible or from Barnes and Noble or from any of the other major audiobook retailers. So having your audiobook uploaded into multiple locations so it's available for lots of people is a great thing. And you can sell it directly from your website, or you can have little cards and you can hand out cards to people. You can also give them away, which I find to be really helpful. Sometimes to be able to give away a free audiobook. Particularly for me, I've got a series. So if I give away a free copy of the first book in the series, it can get people interested in reading or listening to the rest of the series. So if I'm doing face-to-face and I'm talking to somebody and say, hey, I'm an author, and are you a reader? If they say yes, I give them an ebook. If they say, oh, I prefer audiobooks, I'll say, oh, here's an audiobook. And it's a free download, and you have a 9-digit code that you can give out. You can print it on the back of a little business card. It's very, very handy for marketing your audiobooks. So there we are. We're a little more than an hour it took us to get to this point, but we got to the point now where you have an audiobook that you narrated and that you edited and that you mastered and that you uploaded, and it is now available for sale, and your total expense was maybe $350 cash and a whole bunch of hours of your time. You didn't have to hire a professional narrator. You didn't have to put out $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 up front to have an audiobook. Is your audiobook as good as a professionally narrated and a professionally engineered audiobook? The answer is no, it's not. It's not. At the end of the program here's some of these links that are available. So download the presentation and you'll have all of that information for yourself. I'll stop the sharing. But yeah, my books are not as good as professionally narrated audiobooks. Even after having done 8 of them, they're not as good. Is the 8th book better than the first book? Oh, you bet. My goal as a narrator is for my narrated audiobooks to be adequate. I want the narration to be good enough that a reader or listener can listen to the book and enjoy the book and say, oh, I really liked that story, without really even noticing the narrator. I don't want the listener to think that I'm the greatest narrator in the world, because I'm not. But I want them to be able to not even notice the fact that it's me narrating as opposed to a professional. Am I a professional? No. Are you? No. But having an audiobook is still a wonderful thing to have. Last thing I'll say before I start doing Q's and A's is there is now a program out there, including one that's being run by Amazon, to do an AI-generated voice to read your book. I did a test of that. It's not bad. It does require a little editing on your part to listen to it to make sure that you fix problems that the AI encounters where they didn't pronounce the word correctly or they didn't pronounce a name correctly. So it's not like you can just press a button and you automatically have an audiobook. Um, but the time that it would take you to edit through the AI audiobook is far less than the time it would take you to edit your own self-narrated audiobook. Is it as good as you? It's not. It's very obviously AI. It's good AI. The voices are decent, but it's not the same as you actually giving the expression to your story that you can give it as an author. But if you want an audiobook and you just want to have one and you don't want to spend the time to do it yourself, you can think about it. So check out what they have. Be very careful about what you want to do. And also remember that when you upload your book into the AI universe, you lose a little control over it. You are giving it up to the AI bots, and that content can be used by the AI service providers to train their AI. And when somebody puts into their AI box, write me a chapter of a story where X, Y, and Z happens. You may be surprised to see your text show up in somebody else's book because the AI generated it for them. So be careful about AI, but it's an option. It is not as good, I don't think, as you doing it yourself, but it's certainly quicker, and it's something you can think about. So with that, let's see what's in the Q&A.
So we have a few questions here. I'm going to ask you this one because two people asked it. Do you create a new room noise sample every time you do a recording?
No, once you have a good room noise sample, you stick with it, um, because there's no reason not to. The tiny variances between the pre-recorded room noise segment and the actual room noise in your home studio while you're narrating should be infinitesimal if you're using the same studio. Now, if you change your studio and you're doing it in a different location, in a totally different environment, you probably want to re-record your room noise so that the room noise that you're using matches the sound that's in the back of your actual recording while you're recording it. But it shouldn't make that much difference. So you don't need to re-record it a lot.
All right. There was a question. You had Audible up on the screen first. Do you use Audible or Audacity? And money aside, is one easier to master than the other?
Audacity is Audible. Audacity is the name of the program. It's called Audacity Audio Software. It is created by ACX. ACX is the corporation, the corporate name of Audible. So it's all the same. So if you search for Audible or just go to acx.com, they will have the free downloads there where you can get Audacity, or you can just search for Audacity, but it's all the same. Comes from our good friends at Amazon. Their business model, remember, is if 1 million people write a book and sell it to 100 friends, then each one of them sold 100 books, but Amazon sold 100 million books. So they want to make it as easy as possible for you to generate content that they sell and they get their cut of. So they want to make it easy for you if they can.
I had a question. Some trainings recommend punch and roll recording. What's your opinion about trying to learn punch and roll?
I have only a very vague concept of what that means. Um, it's an editing concept. It's a vocal concept to try to add more dynamic range to your speech patterns and to it. It's not necessary. I mean, you're gonna narrate your book the way you want it to be. I think those kinds of, I don't want to call it a trick. It's just a technique. It's not something that I worry about. Certainly, there's a million things you can do. You can use sound effects, uh, which I don't do. The only sound effect that I will use is very occasionally I will write a scene where two characters say the same thing at the same time. And I will actually record both voices and then superimpose them on top of each other so that on the audio you actually hear both voices say the same thing at the same time, which is not that hard. But that's about as much as I will do with audio tricks or sound effects. I wouldn't worry too much about those kinds of issues. I will say about audiobooks too that I was amazed when I first started as an independent author and I had a couple of books and hadn't yet done the first audiobook. I was amazed how many people asked, is it available on audio? And of course I had to say, well, no, not yet. And since I've had them on audiobooks, I've probably sold, and this is just a ballpark, I've probably sold 1,000 audiobooks as opposed to, say, 5,000 ebooks. So is it a big part of my revenue stream? Maybe not. Is it a significant part? Yes, it is. But having it available so that when somebody asks you that question, is it available in audio? You can say, oh, yes, it is. And here's a card where you can go and find it. It lets you market yourself wider. And it definitely makes you look a little more professional as an independent author when you can say, yeah, my books are available on audio. I will tell you, so I have just a couple of minutes here. And those of you who have questions, come on, drop them in there. I know you guys have questions. I will tell you the horror story. I did my first book, Righteous Assassin. It was fairly long. It was 100,000 words, and I narrated it, and I edited the narration, and I was working off of just little earbuds, not these professional headphones. When I was editing, I would go upstairs and I would sit on my couch and watch the ball game, and I'd have the little earbuds in my ear, and I'd be doing my editing, and it all sounded fine. I mean, it didn't sound great, but I was just working off these little earbuds, so that's probably the reason it didn't sound great. And I did the editing, and I did the editing, I did the editing, and I got to chapter 20. And when I was listening to chapter 20 sounded a whole lot better than chapters 1 through 19. And I couldn't figure out why the sound quality was so much better in those chapters. It turned out, as I say, that I had when you're in Audacity, and I will do this one more time just so you can see. When you're in Audacity, I'll share the screen. There is a little box up at the top that says audio setup. Go figure. The audio that goes into the system, recording device, has more than one option. The first one is primary sound capture device. Primary sound capture device is the default microphone in your computer. So you are not capturing the sound that's coming through this wonderful professional microphone. In my ears, I'm hearing what's coming through the professional microphone. But what the computer is actually picking up is what's coming through the default microphone that's built into this to the laptop computer. And so the whole first 19 chapters of the book had sound quality that was just awful. So what did I have to do? I had to re-record. To re-record the whole thing because I didn't check the first couple of chapters carefully enough and realize that my sound input was in the wrong place. And I had, you better bet that every single time I sit down now to start narrating, I triple check to make sure that that sound input is on the correct input so that I don't make that mistake again. But like anything, you learn from your mistakes. That was a hard one, but every time you make a mistake, you get better the next time. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. It took me 2 months to narrate and edit the first book. I'm now down to the point where it takes me about half that time, about 4 weeks, start to finish, to get it all done, just because of being more used to it and familiar with it, and just you do it faster as time goes along. So don't get discouraged if it seems to take a long time in the beginning. It can get better as you move ahead.
Well, I'll do last call for questions. I will say I really appreciated. I'm an audiobook listener. I almost always have one going, and um, when you talked about recording before publishing as sort of a final check to make sure everything's making sense, I remember myself listening once to a thriller where two people have met up for a clandestine meeting. They're in, like, the equivalent of an Apple store, so they could like hop on a computer secretly, and they're having this hushed discussion, and like an hour later, I realized they're still having this conversation in this corner of an Apple store, uh, with time ticking away. And because the time has, it's this conversation in real time. They've been, again, hiding for at least an hour having this conversation. Just again, things you might not realize without an audiobook setup.
I'll give you one more anecdote, and that is about how your brain works. I've had multiple occasions where after I've published a book, uh, I will have a reader who's read the paperback or the ebook send me a note and say, "Hey, there's a mistake on this page in this chapter," and I will go back and I will look at it, and sure enough, there's a word that's in the wrong sequence, or there's something about this sentence. There's a word missing, for example. The word be is supposed to be there, and it's just not there in the middle of the sentence. So I will fix that on the ebook version, and I'll eventually fix it on the paperback version for future printing. And then I'll take a heavy sigh and I will set up my audio studio down in the basement so I can go downstairs and I can re-record that sentence so I can splice it into the audiobook. And on multiple times I've gone back to the audiobook and I've listened to the audio track, and it's not wrong on the audio track. Somehow, when I was narrating the book, I read it the way it was supposed to be, even though the words on the page in front of me were wrong. My brain just automatically corrected it, and I read it correctly. And it's like there's lots of times where you'll see a blemish, you'll see a problem when you're doing the narration, and you'll say, "Oh, oops, that's a problem. The wrong speaker is speaking, or you used the wrong name in a dialogue tag or whatever." But every once in a while, your brain will fix a problem without you even understanding that it was there in the first place. So go figure. Well, thank you all for coming along on this little ride. I hope that it was valuable to you. I hope it makes you think about whether you would like to give it a try to narrate your own audiobook someday. If you do, drop me a note. I would love to hear from you. If you have questions that you want to send directly to me, you can find me on my website, kevingchapman.com. Drop me a note there, and I'll be happy to interact with you and give you whatever pieces of advice I can, because I was in your spot one time in my life, and I want to pay it forward and help other people as they come up through the process.
Wonderful. We've got a lot of thanks for you in the chat here. So I'll echo that. This really was excellent. I love a practical presentation. This was so clear. And I know a lot of people got excellent insight into this process. We look forward to seeing you and a lot of the crowd here tomorrow at Local Author Day. If you're watching live, if you're watching this in the future, again, please connect with Kevin via his website. And we hope you will give this a try and continue to connect with our local author community, which is really doing excellent work. So thank you again, Kevin. We appreciate so much having you with us.
It's my pleasure.
And have a lovely night, everyone. Thank you so much.